This is Everyday Spirituality from Connect.Faith. I'm Brian Barden, here in the present, June 7th, 2020. I wanted to provide some context to the conversation that you're about to hear. Back in February, we had an opportunity to sit down with David LaMotte. Since that time, the world has turned upside down more than once. I believe that I speak for both David and myself when I say that the response to George Floyd's death and the work of the Black Lives Matter movement is a true testament to what happens when people come together. Black Lives Matter organizers across the country are living out the faceless work that David talks about in this episode. It feels odd to have a conversation about advocacy and justice without any reference to the current state of the world. However, we feel this conversation is too good not to share. We hope you'll listen to it and then let us know what you think. Without further ado, here's our conversation with David from February. This is Everyday Spirituality from Connect.Faith. I'm Brian Barden. I'm here with David LaMotte. David is an award-winning songwriter, speaker, and writer. David has been a professional musician for 30 years, published 3 books, and is a frequent keynote speaker. Welcome to Everyday Spirituality.
Such a treat to be with you, Brian.
You talk a lot about the role not of any individual, whether the privilege comes into that or not, but the role of how a lot of individuals need to come together to actually make the change.
Yeah. So the whole phrase world-changing, I kind of squish it together into one word, but that whole concept sounds ludicrous to most people. Like it sounds naive and audacious, right? So I think it bears a little bit of explanation of what exactly I mean when I say that. For one thing, the world is really big, but it's made up of small places like this one right here. And as you and I change each other through our interaction, we will be changed by knowing each other. Guaranteed. I will be changed by knowing you, and vice versa, because that's how it works. In the science of forensics, there's this law that they say every contact leaves a trace. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely true for us as human beings. Everybody we interact with changes a little bit. So this is a part of the world. If we've changed this, we have changed the world.
We're doing work to change
right?
the world. Right?
That is changing the world. It's not fixing the world. And we often use those phrases interchangeably. Fix the world, save the world, change the world. If you think you can fix the world, that is naive and audacious and ridiculous. Right. You cannot fix the world.
Right.
If you think you can save the world, that gig might be taken. But if you think you can change the world, you're just paying attention. It's not naive to think you can change the world. It is the heart of pragmatism. It is naive, in fact, to think you could possibly be in the world and not change it. Everything you do changes the world, whether you like it or not. So when I'm talking about world changing, that's what I'm talking about. And I do feel like, as you intimated there, that we have a narrative as our culture, somewhat humanity, but particularly in the United States, we have a narrative of change. When we see a large-scale change that needs to happen, and everybody sees that, we may disagree about what changes they are, but everybody sees that there's change needed in the world. When we see that large-scale change, we have to think, okay, well, how does that happen? What do we need? And I firmly believe, I've become deeply convinced, that we as a culture have a deeply embedded narrative that is the answer to that question, and it's wrong, and it's toxic. And that answer is, if you want to make a big change, what you need is somebody heroic, somebody dramatic with special gifts, whether those are superhero gifts or they are, this person is particularly brave or particularly outspoken or whatever. But the bottom line is they're different from you. They're special in some way. You need somebody special to do something dramatic in a moment of crisis. And that's how you fix the problem. In order to have an impact, you have to be super special, right? And there is advantage in that narrative for those of us who want to see change but don't really want to make the change, right? Because here's the syllogism. If heroes fix things and I'm not a hero, then it's not my job to fix things, right? It's somebody else's job. And when they do fix things, I do have a role in the story. My job is to clap, right? To applaud the hero.
Right.
And that's an awesome job. I like that one, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We tell hero stories often with the goal of inspiring people. But I believe that it often has precisely the opposite effect, because we hear a dramatic story and we think, I couldn't never have done that, right? Whether or not we could have done it, we think, I could never have done that. And when we tell history, we isolate the pieces that are really dramatic, and we tell that story. So I learned in elementary school that Rosa Parks had chosen to be arrested rather than give up her seat on the bus in Montgomery in 1955. But I didn't learn in school that Rosa Parks had been an activist for 20 years already, that she had been sent 20 years before to the next county on behalf of the local NAACP to represent Reese Taylor, who had been gang raped in the next town. She was a respected leader within that movement 20 years before she was arrested. Nobody told me that she had been the secretary for the NAACP for 12 years already by the time she was arrested that day. Nobody told me that 3 months before she was arrested, she had traveled to the Highlander Center in Tennessee to study nonviolent activism and voter registration for 10 days. Blue-collar woman took that time off work and went at great personal sacrifice to go do this work. 3 months later, she gets arrested on a bus. What a coincidence, right? That's a movement story. It's not a hero story, the way it really happened, right? But we tell it as a hero story because we greatly prefer hero stories, because they're a lot easier for us. If I'm not the hero, and I don't know about you, I don't wake up feeling particularly heroic most days.
No.
I wake up feeling like I need to brush my teeth, and there's somebody I got to call and an email I got to send, right? Most of us, I would say that many of us at least, constitute our own definition of normal. Which harkens back to the privilege conversation. But at any rate, that story needs to be problematized, because the way large-scale change really happens is movements. It's a lot of people doing a little bit each in undramatic ways, largely. The dramatic moments can be useful in inspiring the undramatic work, but the dramatic moments never fix the problem. Their proper function is to inspire the rest of us to get involved. That's the work.
So Rosa Parks getting arrested, not giving up the seat, could inspire a generation of people to take the same steps that she did to get to that point.
Well, in fact, it did inspire a ton of people to show up in Montgomery, right? That's exactly what happened. A lot of college students came down from the north. A lot of folks came from all over the south to join the movement, because this was just wrong. And it was so blatantly, abundantly wrong that people showed up. And that happened because people were doing the organizing work to put that story out there and to invite people and to figure out where they're going to sleep and what they're going to eat, and to do all the boring back channel work to make that happen. We also don't know the story of Joanne Robinson as a culture. Joanne Robinson was the head of the Women's Political Council in Montgomery, which was just a few dozen women there who were agitating for change around issues pertaining to racism. And they were pushing really hard on the bus company for some time before this happened, right? There's a long history in this movement. A year before Rosa Parks was arrested, the Women's Political Council sent a letter to the bus company saying, we have organized a boycott, and we are prepared to launch it if you don't meet some of these demands. And there were many demands. Desegregation was not one of them. They weren't even pushing for that. But they were saying, look, you've got, speaking in loose terms, you've got buses stopping every 2 blocks in white neighborhoods and every 2 miles in black neighborhoods. That's a problem. You need to address that. It's a longer story, but people of color, when they boarded buses in Montgomery, had to pay at the front and then get off the bus and walk halfway back and come in the back entrance, halfway down the bus. So there were driveaways where bus drivers
would take the fare
and then just drive off because they thought it was funny, or they thought you were going too slow, or they didn't like you, or whatever. What are you going to do in 55 if this happens to you? There was an expression in that era of the movement, making a way out of no way, right? Because there was no way, but they made a way out of no way. And Joanne Robinson, head of the Women's Political Council, got word pretty quickly when Rosa Parks was arrested. It was a Thursday night. It was a few minutes before 6. And somebody called Joanne Robinson and filled her in on what was going on. Joanne Robinson checked in with Fred Gray, who was the one of two African-American attorneys in Montgomery at the time, and worked with her in movement work. Wanted to check in with him, but he was down at the courthouse with Rosa Parks, so she left a message on his voicemail. No, it was 1955. She left a message with somebody who wrote it down beside the phone, and he called her back when he got home about 11 o'clock. They discussed it for a minute, and Joanne Robinson said, I think it's time, I'm going to launch the boycott. And she did. She and two of her English students, she was an English professor at Alabama State, African-American woman teaching at an African-American school at the time. They went down to the college and met a guy with keys to the copy room who then went home. And she and two of her students made thousands of copies on an old school mimeograph, cranking the handle from midnight to 4 a.m. From 4 a.m., and then they cut them all. There were 3 up. There was a 3-up strip flyer. And they cut them all. And then from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., they drove them all over town to the team captains of the Women's Political Council, who then distributed them in their own neighborhoods. So by 8 a.m., 14 hours after Rosa Parks was arrested, everybody in the African-American part of Montgomery had this flyer on their door, every home, every business, right? Nobody has ever heard of Joanne Robinson. Right. And get this, Joanne Robinson called the Montgomery bus boycott. Nobody knows her name. Movement work just isn't all that dramatic. Making copies is not really, it doesn't look great on camera, right? But that's the work.
And in 1955, she was able to get thousands and thousands of the word out to thousands and thousands of people. No Facebook.
Yeah, she didn't post it on Instagram. They made this happen, but they had it organized for a year in advance, and this was all possible because they had been meeting all along. They had been doing the work the whole time. So the non-dramatic work allowed Rosa Parks' arrest to be significant. Please don't misunderstand me, anybody. I'm not taking anything away from the beautiful sacrifice of Rosa Parks. It was awesome. But what allowed that to have such significance historically was all this work happening behind the scenes that happened in tandem with that. And there's so much more to that story. Claudette Colvin was arrested 9 months before Rosa Parks in a very similar circumstance. Teenage girl, she was pregnant at the time and unmarried. And the movement decided not to put her arrest forward as the emblem of their movement. It would have destroyed this young girl for her safety, right? For her safety, and also because it wasn't their best pitch, right?
Right.
Rosa Parks had this just dignity about her that was just unescapable, and so I've heard people tell it too much in the other direction as well. Rosa Parks wrote in her own autobiography that she was not planning to get arrested that day. It wasn't a setup. But when it happened, she realized that it could have significance for the movement, and this was the right thing. So it is, I think it's very important for us to remember that what makes the change is that small, undramatic, consistent effort over time. And there's good news there, which is that you are not powerless, right? We can show up and do the work. We don't have to be Superman to show up and do the work. The work that really moves it forward is that undramatic work of showing up, gathering together in a group, making sure the people are in the room who have the biggest stake in this and have things to say about it, and then deciding together what we're going to do, who's going to do which part, when we're going to do it, when we're going to meet up again to make sure we did it and figure out what to do next, right? I hate to say it, it breaks my heart, having grown up in the Presbyterian Church, but what changes the world is committees, right? I mean, people gathering together to figure out what needs to be done and how we're going to do it. That's how we change the world. And that's good news because it means we are not powerless.
We hope you enjoyed that part of our conversation with David LaMotte. If the episode inspired you to do the work of world-changing and to join a movement, we're including a link in the description with more information about how to get involved with Black Lives Matter. You can find out more about us on our website, connect.faith, and we hope to see you next time.